we got topic one: Steve Nash versus Jason Kidd. MTL, we are going to start with you. So your time starts
Okay.
whenever you start.
All right. Yeah, I shouldn't have closed on that book. But all right. So first thing we're gonna say, I have Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd was a two-way playmaking Iron Man. Honestly, Steve Nash was like a three-point playmaker, and if we know in NBA history, three-point playmakers have never been outside of Steph. You can't really name too many that's been the a lead guard that has led their team to winning championships. Which the same can be said about Steve Nash as a point guard. Is that to say that Steve Nash is bad? No, that's not saying Steve Nash is bad. But was he on the same level as a lead guard as J Kidd? I don't think so. I think players with J Kidd's style of play have a higher ceiling than a player with Steve Nash ceiling outside of Steph Curry, like I said. Steve well, not Steve Nash, sorry. J Kidd was a better winner. He did more earlier. He did more for a greater period of time, in my opinion. And I just think Steve Nash got a little overrated at a certain point in his career when you just start looking at the assist numbers. You started looking at, oh, 50, 40, 90. But if you really break it down more, you start finding out there's a lot about that was really overrated, and probably is the reason why a lot of people feel like his MVPs were stolen in a sense. I'm not going to say that about him, but that is the narrative that's been out there, and that's kind of why I actually think his best year that he had was the year after the back-to-back MVPs that he won. Crazily enough, that's why I'm gonna start.
All right, that was fire, MTL. Yo, MTL, is there any way you can switch your mic? If you can do that. If not, then
Yeah,
we'll have to deal with what you got. But while
I
he's
got you.
fixing that, ZZ, it's on you, my man. Go ahead and rebuttal.
So for me, this was a tough one. I love both these point guards, but when I think about what I need in an ideal point guard, I think Steve Nash provides me a lot of that value that you really look for when you break it down. You're talking about what do you look for in an ideal point guard? Efficiency, playmaking, decision making, all of those things. And for Steve Nash, people talk about how the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns were revolutionary ahead of their time. That's true, but you want to know who else was revolutionary and ahead of their time? Steve Nash. This was a guy that could pass the ball like Magic Johnson, but shoot like Steph Curry. Throughout the 2000s, in the early 2000s, there was not a point guard in the league that you could name that was a better shooter than Steve Nash. And the only knock against Steve Nash's career, especially when it comes to those MVP years, when you really look back on it, is that he didn't shoot the ball more. That was the only knock. That's the biggest thing when you look back at those Phoenix Suns years. But I'm not even going to get into those. I'm going to save that for round two. When I look at Steve Nash before he got back to Phoenix, when he was in Dallas, right? He got to Dallas at the same time as Dirk Nowitzki. And it took them about a couple of years to really get things rolling until they got Michael Finley there to solidify that big three. And when that happened, the Dallas Mavericks had the number one offense in the league for 3 straight years. The only thing that got them from missing the finals or missing the finals was defense, rebounding, in certain unlucky situations. And then when we get to those MVP years that you talk about that a lot of people like to overrate, it's one thing to say you don't think Steve Nash was the best player in the league, but it's a whole different thing to say that you think that he didn't deserve to be in the MVP conversations when he turned around a 29-win Phoenix Suns team the year prior to him getting there. But we'll save that.
All right. ZZ's gonna save it, but as of right now, MTL, we need to hear what you got. Round two. Talk to us.
All right. So I never said one time that that he wasn't in the MVP conversation, that he wasn't good enough to be in the talks. Never one time said that. I won't say that. But what I'm saying is they both were players that were top 10 in considerations 8 times. I just think that J Kidd's style of play is just better for your team if you want to be better long term. Yes, Steve Nash did a lot in his career, but J Kidd was always just a better winner. Everything about his play style, even going past just him playing, but I'm gonna stick to him playing. He was in MVP voting since his rookie year. That's crazy. He had consideration for that as a rookie. He was a part of 3 different championships teams. Yes, he won one, but he was on 3 different teams. That's more. That's 3 more than Steve Nash has ever seen in his career. Steve Nash was a generational player in terms of playing just his style of play. Like they played a very fun style, but it was never a winning style of basketball that they were really playing. Jason Kidd just always put teams just in a better spot. The fact that he played with Dirk too, and then won with Dirk, and then Nash couldn't do it, I think that says a lot. If you ask me, just his impact of being on a team put them to the levels that we didn't even think they was going to be able to do. We honestly just thought that Heat team was going to honestly probably sweep them. A lot of us thought it was probably a wash, but the impact of him just being on that team was very big for the success they got. And honestly, that's why.
Zeezy, topic 1, round 2. Your time starts when you do.
So you brought up how Jason Kidd won with Dirk Nowitzki as a 37-year-old role player who still did his part, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't the same Jason Kidd that was leading the Nets to the NBA Finals in 2002 and in 2003. And when you talk about him being able to lead teams to bigger success or what have you, was that more predicated to the fact that he played in different conferences, whereas Steve Nash played in the Western Conference his entire career? When we talk about Steve Nash's MVPs, you talked about how Jason Kidd was in the MVP conversation. Steve Nash was winning MVPs, not just in the conversations. In 2005, he turned that Phoenix Suns team from a 29-win team in 2004 to the #1 seed in the Western Conference. And then in 2006, with Amari Stoudemire only playing 3 games on the year and expectations for the Suns to be nothing, he still manages to lead them to the second best record in the Western Conference. And when you really look at Steve Nash's, when I talked about his 50, 40, 90 seasons, for his career, he shoots 49% from the field, he shoots 50, 40, 90 almost for his entire career. When you look at Jason Kidd, he shoots 40% from the field and 39% from the field in the postseason. And when you really look at 2006 to 2010, Steve Nash almost went every single year shooting 50, 40, 90. There are 10 players in NBA history to say that they've been able to shoot 50, 40, 90. 2 of those come from Kevin Durant. 2 of those come from Larry Bird. 4 of them come from Steve Nash alone. So when you talk about efficiency along with point guard ability, that's Steve Nash to the T.
All right, MTL. Round 3. We need you to talk to us.
All right. So we're talking about 50-49 season. If you really break down the 50-49 season that you're talking about, he came from being an 88% free throw shooter to next year he got to 92. Cool, I guess. You know what also happened in that same season? This was his second MVP, by the way. He actually had less assists and more turnovers. I think that's an interesting take. He scored more points because he was shooting the ball more. He shot about 7 times more that season. And he still only scored about 4 to 5 more points than what he was doing the year before, while having more turnovers and getting less assists. And people getting so excited about he had a few more percentages towards his free throw shooting to put it into the 50-49. That's cool. But again, like I said, I feel like that's more like a mirage to look over his career to just be like, peak efficiency that didn't win. I'm about to say, you can say that same thing happened for Curry, but Curry took that and became a more impactful version of that. And I'm sorry, Steve Nash he had a ceiling to how good he could be. And although, yes, he did win 2 MVPs, there was a lot of conversation around those. And honestly, I think just the fact that they got too wrapped up into that 50, 40, 90 thing, people tend to get too wrapped up into some type of weird narrative as to why they give MVPs. And I think just doing that, not acknowledging that his best season, honestly, was the year right after he won back to back is crazy to me. And I just think kid had it.
All right, ZZ. One last round on this topic. Talk to us.
So I know you brought up turnovers, which is interesting because when you look at Jason Kidd, he played about 18 years, Steve Nash about 17, and they both averaged the same amount of turnovers per game for their careers and in the postseason. And you can honestly make the arguments fully for Steve Nash being the better playoff performer. The first time that Jason Kidd averaged about 20 points at least per game in a postseason was in 2002. He shot 42% from the field and 19% from 3. Coincidentally, the first time that Steve Nash also averaged 20 points in a playoff series was in 2002, where he put up 20 points, 6 assists, and 3 rebounds on 43, 44, 97 splits. So what you really want in an ideal point guard, you get from Steve Nash. Everything else is all about building around that player. So if Steve Nash was playing with those great defensive Nets teams in the Eastern Conference, if they flipped, you don't think Steve Nash would also walk straight to the NBA Finals, shooting it at a much better clip than Jason Kidd, surrounded by great defenders? I think so. And when you really look at it and you break down both of these guys' careers, because they played damn near the same exact amount of time, the only difference was Jason Kidd was drafted in 94 and Steve Nash was drafted in 96. When you look at it, They played almost the same amount of years, and Steve Nash played in a tougher conference every single year for his career in comparison to Jason Kidd. He's the overall more efficient player. They both averaged the same amount of turnovers. So when you really look at it, you could say that he turned the ball over a lot, but Jason Kidd was shooting the ball like prime Russell Westbrook on the Los Angeles Lakers. So it's a two-way street, but I'm going to go Nash for the efficiency.
All right, you guys heard it first here. We're about to run the poll so you guys can go run the votes up.
Okay.
All right, let's get into topic 2, round 1. Zeezy, the time will start whenever you do.
Look, I know when I first got this question, I think my initial thought was to go Celtics, but then I sat back and I thought about it, and I was like, well, in the last couple of years, I've heard NBA discourse say, we done with the 90s. Well, if we done with the 90s, what the hell are we doing with the 60s? I mean, we're talking about the 60s Celtics. In 1960, there was about 8 teams in the league. There was 8 teams. From 1961 to 1966, there were 9 teams in the league. So for me, the biggest difference between both of these dynasties and what makes one better is the parity amongst the league, not just with teams themselves, but also players. When you look at 1960 and 1961, the Celtics went up against the St. Louis Hawks back-to-back years, if I'm not mistaken. Throughout the 60s, it was either the Celtics, the St. Louis Hawks, or the Lakers that was in the finals. When you look at the Bulls from 91, they played the Lakers. 92, the Trailblazers. 93, the Suns. That's parity. What you got was passing of the torch from the elder statesmen of Magic Johnson to Michael Jordan. You got a good Portland team, Clyde Drexler, Terry Porter, right? Danny Ainge, Jerome Kersey. Then you got a 93 Suns team with the MVP Charles Barkley, right? Danny Ainge again, Kevin Duckworth and the crew. And what you had was a situation where you didn't know who was going to come out of the West, but you relatively knew that the Bulls were there and ready to stay. And so for me, when I look at that and I bottle all of that up, the parity amongst the league in the 90s was at parity that wasn't even remotely close in the 60s. You had the Celtics winning championships at the expense of less than 10 teams compared to the Bulls winning championships at the expense of about 27 max. So I'll go with the Bulls.
Dub parody. MTEL, it's on you. Round 1. Talk to us.
All right. So I'm glad that you actually gave me the 60 Celtics in this conversation, only because, yes, the conversation we're done with the 90s, but that really just means anything 90s and back. So really, this is 2 canceled teams. So that logic doesn't really work to me. The Celtics was more dominant for longer. 9 years out of a 10-year stretch, 9 years out of a possible 10, they won the championship. The only time they didn't win, really, injuries, if we want to be honest. But even I'm using the 60s. Obviously, the wins went back to before the 60s. That's the crazy part. They were so good that there really was no competition. Yes, you could say it's the same circle of teams, but listen, there's less teams. So that means that all of the better talent is going to the better teams. The Bulls came up in a time where it's just like, all right, cool. Yeah, they were great. They had a 3-peat. Jordan went away. What happened to him for a little bit of time? Yeah, he came back and they won again, but you left a what if in the air. The Celtics didn't give you no what if. There was just dominance. Bill Russell came in and they never looked back. They just won. They won, and then he lost 2 times. He had 2 years where he didn't win the championship. Every other year that he was there, they won. And that went back to before the 60s. We're talking about a team that literally you see it for a whole decade of basketball. We just was like, bro, we might as well just skip to the next decade. They were just that good. They were way more dominant.
All right. ZZ is back on you. It's your time to rebuttal. Time starts when you do.
So let's talk about that second half. I know you said we don't want to talk about what ifs because, Michael Jordan retired or went away for gambling purposes or however you want to call it to play baseball. But when he got back, let's really talk about what happened. I mean, the Chicago Bulls in 1995, 1996 went 72-10. That is second all-time winning percentage in the regular season. The following year, they went 69-15, which is tied for third highest winning percentage in regular season history. That's something that the Celtics were not doing, even though there were 8 teams for them to really work, or 7 other teams for them to really go up against. And so when I look at that second three-peat and I compare it to the first one, it leads me even more questions. You had a 62-20, I think, Supersonics team led by Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. And when you really look at it, outside of that, It was back-to-back years with the Jazz, of course, but you had an MVP Karl Malone at one point and the best point guard in the league at that time in John Stockton. So the level of competition that the Bulls had to go through, and also changing up their dynasty along the way. You got to think, at the first half of the decade, it was Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Phil Jackson, right? BJ Armstrong, John Paxson, I think Bill Cartwright or whatever. And then Horace Grant. How could I forget? And then in the second half, what they were able to do was, because they lost some of those role players, they were able to replace them, replacing John Paxson with Steve Kerr, replacing Horace Grant with Dennis Rodman, right? Going to go get Tony Kukoc, giving yourself a threat off the bench from the EuroLeague that nobody's really talking about. And then what you had was more and more wins, even than what they got in 91 through 93.
MTEL, it is round 3. We need you to rebuttal and talk to us, my man. Make your closing compelling case.
Round 3 or round 2? Or wait.
It's round 2 for you. Round 2 for you. Yeah, it's round 2 for you.
Okay, yeah. All right, just want to make sure. All right. So yes, you talked about the 2 sets of teams here. Yes, they had 2 different three-peats. We already went over that. The Celtics literally had more wins during their three-peat in that same span of time. We talking about a 10-year span. The Celtics won more in a 10-year span than the Bulls did, and it was in a row. The Bulls won 3 in a row. They won 6. They won 7 actually. They won 7 in a row before they saw a loss. And yes, Jordan played in a interesting time period because outside of just pure greatness and stuff, he also played in an expansion era. We were adding new teams. Y'all know I like the Magic. We were one of the teams that got added during this time. The Heat was one of the teams that got added during this time. And you know what they do during expansion times. That means there was better teams that lost some of their better core players for their team. So they honestly made the road easier. I think it's interesting at the time when Jordan started winning more was also the time when Larry Bird was going out the league, when he was basically on the backside of his career, when the Bad Boy Pistons was on the backsides of their careers. He couldn't beat them when they were in their primes. You know, the Bulls team couldn't beat them when they were in their primes. And then I just think it's ironic that expansion happens right after that, and then they start winning. I think all of that played a part. Plus, Jordan being going for the time that he was going played a part. Whether you want to say it was good or a bad thing, that was rest. You know how long a NBA season is. A lot of things could have been put in the air. I just think there's too much unknown to say that the Bulls were better.
All right, here we go. This is the last round of this topic. Zeezy, finish it out.
So you talked about how the expansion teams makes you wonder how good the Bulls really were, and the fact that they beat teams when they were on the back end of their career. Isaiah Thomas was what, 30, 31 when Jordan and them swept them. So when I really think about it and I look back, the one question that I have is the impact on the game as a whole, not just the game on the whole as a whole, but the world. When we think about the 90s Bulls, that was an impactful franchise and organization, an influential franchise and organization that bled out to even 90s pop culture. The funny part is Bill Russell was winning championships and still getting called racial slurs by his home fans, which is crazy because that just shows you how wild the world was back then. But even leading up to his jersey retirement, he had a private jersey retirement because he didn't want any Boston fans in attendance. He didn't even have an influential impact on his community despite winning 7 straight championships in the 60s, albeit against teams that albeit against a league that had less than 10 teams, but it is what it is. So for me, when I look at the Bulls, their impact spanned not just across the league, but across the world. So you can talk about how they knocked teams off at the end, or they didn't beat Bird in their prime, of course, because it was Michael Jordan and crackheads. But yet Michael Jordan was still able to drop 60 points plus on the number 1 team in the league, that Celtics team, to the point where after the game, despite them winning, Larry Bird looks at Michael Jordan and calls him God in disguise as a basketball player. So the influence not only bleeds through Michael Jordan, but the Bulls team as a whole for their decade. They were appreciated and celebrated as such.
Yes, sir, Zeezy. MTEL, it's your last round. Follow this up with something special, my guy.
Right. I'm glad that you brought up the time period that Bill Russell played in. He played in an era where, like you said, he was hated. The whole time he was winning, he was being hated by his home crowd. You have to think about the extra challenge that is to win like that. To think of, you're waking up every day as a black man trying to be like, dang, I got to play in front of these people that don't even like me because of my skin color. Think about that. He had to fight through that where Jordan really had all the praise going in. He had all the people wanting him to be good. Even he basically was getting the treatment that Luka gets today as a player. where it's just everybody wants him to be the best. So we're going to, I'm not going to say pull strings for him, but we're definitely going to favor him in some type of way. Bill Russell, the 60 Celtics, they didn't get that type of favoritism. It was actually the exact opposite. So for all them outside factors to play a part and for them to still win on the level that they did, knowing that they were never wanted to win because of the situations that was in front of them, the fact that they won more times than the Jordan Bulls did throughout the same process, the fact that he was just purely more dominant. He even had to guard one of the players that we know is Mr. Myth and Wilt Chamberlain, the dude that we're talking about literally dropped 100 points in the game and hasn't been done ever since. We're talking about a dude who had a season where he averaged 50 points. He could stop him. That guy couldn't beat him. Think about that. A dude who was getting like 30 rebounds and 50 points a game. He stopped that guy. Jordan never had to play against a dude who did anything close to as crazy as that as a statistical performance. And he was stopping that dude routinely. That dude couldn't match up.
Sorry, MTL. I had to mute you. I had to mute you, my man. Your time is up. But I heard some compelling cases. I heard a good debate. I think we had a good one, people. I think it was. The polls are about to go up right now, and you guys talk to us. Let us know who you believe won this first matchup. That is the first two rounds. Let's get on to topic 3. And with topic 3, I need both of you guys to make a compelling case, not just a case, a compelling case for this player being the GOAT. We have Shaq and we have Kobe. I want to hear your case on why this player can be the greatest of all time. Y'all ready?
Yep.
MTL, it's on you to kick us off. Let's do it.
Okay, so when you think of dominance, who's one of the first players that come to mind? For a lot of us like me, it's Shaquille O'Neal. When you think about Shaquille O'Neal, you think about the most dominant force in NBA history. I really can't think of a center, in my personal opinion, that I actually think is better than Shaq. Yes, you can find ones who have all these career statistics that you can say maybe makes them better, but a lot of that comes down to situation. In Shaq's situation, he was just great. The fact that he limited a piece of his game and still played in a way where he could win as much as he did and he could dominate as much as he did while not even using his full percentage of his game tells me how great of a player he actually was. We're comparing him to Kobe. Shaq literally was in MVP vote since his rookie year. 13 years in a row, he was in MVP conversations. He was in top 10 considerations for I want to say 12. Yeah. 12 of those 13 times he was top 10 considerations for MVP. Where to Kobe? Kobe had 11. Shaq was just dominant since day one. It took Kobe at least 4 years to at least get in the realm of that level, and then 5 years to actually get into that level as a top 10 MVP vote getter. And that took until Shaq got on the team. Shaq literally helped Kobe to become the player that he became. And Shaq was always great at knowing when he needed to put his foot on the gas, when he needed to take his foot off the gas. And he really helped to hardwire Kobe to be the player that he grew into.
All right, Zeezy, round 1. Talk to us.
So for me, the first thing that came to mind when I saw this question was Kobe, because I used to tell my friends all the time when Kobe retired. He retired with 2 Hall of Fame careers and 2 different jersey numbers. Only player in NBA history, if I'm not mistaken, to get both 2 different jersey numbers retired for the same exact organization. And when he was wearing number 8, he gave you 16,866 points, 8 All-Star appearances, and 3 titles. In number 24, he gave you 16,178 points, 9 All-Stars, 2 titles, 2 Finals MVPs, 3 trips to the finals straight, and an MVP. So when I think about that, and I think about also the influence on the game as a whole, Kobe in China was damn near as famous as Michael Jackson anywhere overseas, with that much love and appreciation that he got from over there. So when I look at that, I think to myself, on top of the fact that he's a narrative killer for the entirety of his career. There was a lot of different points in Kobe's career where he had to kill some sort of narrative. One narrative in particular that people like to use is that Shaq carried Kobe throughout the first three-peat. Even though when you look at 2000 to 2002, Kobe gave you 28, 6, and 6 a game. in that stretch. And if it wasn't for Kobe throughout the playoffs, the Lakers might not have even made it to the finals for Shaq to go up against Rick Smits and Dale Davis and the crew and Dikembe Mutombo, right? And then Kenyon Martin and the crew. So if it wasn't for Kobe getting them to the finals, Shaq probably wouldn't have been able to dominate as much as he did. So it's Kobe for me.
All right, MTL. What's your rebuttal to that?
Okay, so first, I'm not gonna hit you with the Shaq carried. No, you need a team to be able to win. I'm not saying Shaq carried, but he was the better player the whole time that he was on the team with Kobe. The only time you started thinking that Kobe was better was towards the end of Shaq's career. Around the time when he was about to, get traded. Around the time that he got moved to other teams, and even then, it's still like the fact that every year prior to that, he was just better. And like there's no question about it. It took Kobe a good minute to become great. Shaq was great out of the gate, being great since basically when you started being in the league, and then just stretching out to almost your whole career. I think that's just more of an accomplishment than what Kobe did. Kobe became great. Shaq started great. I think that is a complete difference between them two as players. His only real weakness was really just stalling him. All you could do was stall Shaq. They had extra dudes put on the bench, literally just to come in and just foul Shaq. That was the only way they could think to stop him. To the point where the NBA had to make new rules to find ways to stop Shaq. They had to make new rules to be like, all right, okay, we can't just let the fouling thing just happen all again because it was making the games take too long. We had all these rules put in place. Literally, they had to change the league for Shaq. That's how dominant he was. There was no real stopping him. It was just, he's just great. And yes, he dominated other great players. I don't know. I'll get to that on my next point.
All right. Zeezy, talk to us.
So for me, yes, Shaquille O'Neal dominated other players, and yes, you can make the argument that he was the better player at the time. But when I look at Kobe Bryant during that time, you're talking about a 21 to 23-year-old Kobe playing second fiddle to the most dominant force in the league. And when you look at the 01 playoffs, for example, I could talk about the 2000 playoffs, but the only thing I really talk about is that Game 7 Western Conference Finals that everybody remembers Kobe throwing the lob to Shaq. But what they don't remember was the Lakers being down 13 to 15 points going into the fourth quarter, and Kobe ended up finishing the game outscoring and out-rebounding Shaquille O'Neal in a pivotal Game 7 to get them to the finals, but it is what it is. In the 2001 playoffs, Kobe averaged 29 a game, 7 rebounds, 6 assists on 47% shooting. In the second round, when they swept the Sacramento Kings, he averaged 35 a game, right? And then you get to the Western Conference Finals against the number 1 seeded San Antonio Spurs. Kobe averaged another 30 piece against them in 4 straight games. So you could make a legitimate argument that Kobe was the best player on the floor for 2 straight playoff series leading up to the 2002 NBA or 2001 NBA Finals. So when I look at that, I say Kobe was just as good and just as deadly as a second option as he was as a first option. Kobe might be one of the only players in the all-time list, a consistent top 10, where you can say that during his prime, he was surrounded by scrubs, literally. And it wasn't until 2007, 2008, once they brought in Pau Gasol, Lamar Odom, and the crew, and Kobe Bryant was able to really take heed of being the number 1 option and teach Pau how to play his part that led to them winning 2 championships out of a 3-year stretch at the end of the 2000s.
Talk to us, Zeezy. I heard you loud and clear. MTL, it is your chance to respond back to that. You have one more time.
Yes, sir. All right. So every time Shaq was given a dual guard that was great, he's literally went to the finals 3 different times in his career, 3 different teams. To me, being able to be great on multiple teams, knowing that your whole roster is different, knowing everything about the situation is different. You don't know how the front office is going to be. You don't know how the supporters is going to be. You don't know how the media is going to be towards you. You don't know how the refs is going to be towards you. All of that was changing for Shaq. And he still found a way to go to the finals on 3 different organizations. And he's won a championship on 2 of those. Yes, Kobe has 1 more championship than him. But Shaq on the same team as Kobe had 3 finals MVPs to Kobe's 2 that he had when Shaq was off of the team. I think just in that alone, that statement right there is already enough to tell you that Shaq was the better player just from starting right there. Yes, you can say the leading up there, you can say that about every type of game. They need a big shot ball to win them a game before. So if we want to just be like, well, who won this game off of this shot, we can start going down the team and just start pulling up players that hit a game winner. That doesn't really necessarily matter to me. Yes, Shaq was just more dominant. He went to the finals with 3 different teams, and in his younger era, he actually beat one of the players that we consider to be the possible GOAT today, in Michael Jordan. He beat his team while they were in their prime. Kobe has never done a feat anything close to that. He beat the Jordan Bulls to go to the finals before. I think that tells you all you need to know.
All right, ZZ. Last round of the battle. Talk to us.
So for me, that last point that you had made about Kobe not doing anything to equate that, what Shaq did was beat a Michael Jordan that had just got back from that little gambling addiction. So the very next year, once the Chicago Bulls re-upped and got Dennis Rodman, because they did not sweep them when they had Dennis Rodman on the team, the Bulls actually swept the Magic. So it is what it is. But the third thing for me, one of the things that you brought up about Shaq, you said he didn't have a lot of weaknesses outside of something, but the one thing that you left out was his mentality. The biggest weakness for Shaquille O'Neal is the fact that we couldn't see that dominance be sustained for a longer period of time. At the end of the day, the biggest source of their beef between Kobe and Shaq was Shaq winning championships and finals MVPs, like you said, and then going to go pick up a donut instead of a dumbbell. That was Kobe's biggest beef with this man. The fact that Kobe was able to play 20 years and the fact that he was able to see 2 different variations of a Phil Jackson-led Lakers team should tell you that who really needed who more, Kobe or Shaq. Like I mentioned before, if it wasn't for Kobe's dominance throughout the playoffs leading up to those championships in the early years, Shaq wouldn't have been able to average 35 plus a game against bum centers besides Dikembe Mutombo. And then when you look at him in his latter half of his year, they get Pau Gasol on the team. That was their version of Shaquille O'Neal. And Kobe had to work that man to get him to say, hey, look, you got to be able to go toe-to-toe with Kevin Garnett in the paint. You got to be able to go toe-to-toe with prime Dwight Howard in the paint while I go ahead and cook playing through injuries and shit and winning back-to-back finals MVPs. So for me, it's Kobe.
All right, y'all. There you have it. This was definitely one of the better topics to me that we've had. Make a case for these guys being the GOAT. You know, we all love Shaq. We all love Kobe. And so now these guys got to really express why they believe that these two are 2 of the best of all time.
I'm not gonna lie. All three things, when I thought about it later, I said I chose the harder person to debate every single time. Like every single topic, I chose the harder topic. I thought about that later. But it's okay.
Yeah, these were some hard topics. I ain't gonna lie. Like the Steve Nash and Jason Kidd one was the one for me. I was like, bro,
Yeah,
I've always said Kidd was underrated, but damn.
Yeah, I like both.
All right, fellas. That was a dope ass debate. I appreciate y'all for coming up, throwing hands, and doing what you do best. We will catch you guys again next week. Let me see who. Let me move ahead and see who you guys got. So next week, Zeezy has Pirate, and next week it looks like you have a bye, MTL. You do have a bye.
Yeah. Let's go.
We'll catch you week 4, MTL. Zeezy, you and Pirate next week. Can't wait to see it.
Yes, sir. Good to see you.
All right,
fellas.
Thank y'all.
It's the player choice way. Yeah, them boys gon' get it started. The player choice way. Yeah, the player choice way. Come and switch lanes into the player choice way.